Good evening, sir. Today's first article is on inevitable collapse, means unavoidable collapse. With COVID 19 hitting private consumption, demand recovery will hinge on government spending. So, while COVID 19 is hitting the private consumption, the demand recovery will be movable, joint, and government spending. The inevitable has happened means the certain to happen. The unavoidable has happened. India's GDP suffered its steepest contraction on record in the April June quarter as output shrunk 23.9% from a year earlier, provisional data show. So, India's GDP have suffered the deepest contraction one on record in the April and May June's quarter, as output of 23.9% from a year earlier, the provisional data which was shown. It is evident that the stringent COVID 19 lockdowns enforced through the first third of the quarter and substantially in May hollowed out demand. So, it is evident that the strict and firm COVID 19 lockdown enforced through the first third of the quarter and substantially in May hollowed out demand means make a deep out demand. Private consumption spending, which accounts for almost 60% of GDP, contracted 26.7% as consumers absorbed almost all discretionary spending. So, the private consumption spending means a private consumption spending which accounts means which fulfills almost 60% of GDP and contracts 26.7% of consumers abjured meaning abjure meaning solemnly renounce. So the abjured almost all discretionary means optional spending and exports which contribute to a fifth of GDP to about 22% from 32% a year earlier as larger business conserved cash and refrained from any capital spending in the face of uncertainty, and smaller firms prioritize its survival. So the investment activity was the worst hit, collapsing 47% and shrinking in share of GDP to about 22% from 32% a year earlier, and the larger business conserved cash and refrained meaning controlled from any capital spending in the face of uncertainty, and smaller firms prioritize survival. Across the real economy, every single industry and services sector shrank with the solitary exception of agriculture, which grew 3.4% and outpaced the year earlier quarter's 3% expansion. So every service sector have shrank except agriculture. Agriculture has increased 3.4% and outpaced the earlier quarter's 3% expansion. Construction suffered the most, plunging 15%, followed by the omnibus services category, trade, hotels, communication, transport, and broadcasting, which shrank 47%, hit by the pandemic linked restrictions. So the constitution suffered more by plunging 50%, followed by the volume containing several books. Comprising several times service category, trade, hotels, communication, transport, and broadcasting have shrank till 47% in the pandemic linked restrictions. Manufacturing took a severe beating, contracting 39% as demand for products deemed not essential evaporated, and of factories even after reopening struggled to ran amid shortages of labor and added safety norms. So, manufacturing also took a severe beating. There was a contraction of 39% as demand from products deemed meaning is judged. So, uh, ducts judged non-essential evaporated, and the factories, even after reopening, struggled to run amid shortages of labor and safety norms. It was left the government to keep the bottom from falling out on demand as the center's pandemic mitigations expenditure helped expand its consumption spending by 16.4% year on year and softened the overall blow to GDP. So it was left to the government at the bottom from falling out the demand at the centers. Pandemic mitigation means elevation or reduce out on demand at centers. Help expand its consumption, spending by 16.4% year on year and soften this overall blow to GDP. However, with the fiscal deficit already having exceeded the full year's budgeted target in just the first 4 months and revenue receipts impacted by the economic contraction, the government is unlikely to maintain a similar trend in expenditure growth over the next 3 quarters. So they are expecting a similar growth. Unless, of course, it is prepared to forsake its wanted fiscal conservatism and finds innovative ways to mobilize resources. So the fiscal deficit already have exceeded the full year budgets, and the contraction is likely to maintain a similar expenditure growth, and the prepared forsake wanted fiscal conservation and finds the innovative ways to mobilize resources. Means innovative ways. The still rising trajectory of new COVID-19 injections and a high level of job losses and income erosion are also sure to retard data from IHS Markit showing manufacturing PMI for August signaling growth for the first time in 5 months. The same researchers find also stress that job sharing continues at a strong strength in the industry. So there was a trajectory means a path. The IHS have said that the marketing manufacturing PMI in August signaling the growth of first time in this month, and equally significant the output numbers which are expected to undergo revision given the acknowledgement difficulties in collecting data do not capture a swathe means a very broad strip of area of this COVID-19 informal sector activity that was severely impacted. The agriculture too faces headwinds in the form of higher than ideal rainfall to August in several key crop growing regions in western and central India, and with the impact of recent market ordinances yet to play out, it may be a while before the end of the tunnel is sighted. So today's first article is about the COVID-19 pandemic. It is said that the GDP and the economy is slightly growing up these days, and that should be covered very soon. So COVID-19 have a lot of its effects on economy. So economy has felt a lot, and now it's rising slow by slow. And agriculture was increased by 3.9%. It should be very nice. It's very nice to hear this. Thank you.